In an effort to create a more interactive way to gain different perspectives, learn and educate each other about personal experiences surrounding the Filipino community and identity, we created O.P.E.N with Kaba. This stands for Opening Perspectives, Edukasyon Ngayon, which translates to Education Now. Hi everyone, I'm Camelia Hines, one of this year's Kababayan at UCI's Community and Political Affairs chairs.
I'm Janina Serra, and I am the other SIPA chair this year. So this event is inspired by Jubilee's Spectrum series on YouTube, in which people stand on different lines and state their opinions. There are physical lines set up: neutral, agree, disagree, somewhat disagree, strongly disagree, and prefer not to answer. After each question, Kaba members stand in the lines according to their stance, and then they are given the time to share their perspectives with each other.
For fall quarter, we chose the topic, Aspects of Being Filipino, and the following footage presents what the members of Kababayan at UCI had to say about topics relating to the Filipino identity and community.
First question, adobo is better than sinigang.
So I think adobo is so versatile, like you can make it so many different ways, like pusti adobo, chicken adobo, pork adobo. So like in that realm, that's why I would say I prefer it over sinigang.
Okay, so I like both, but I just feel like sinigang is like for either if you're sick or cold weather, whereas I feel like adobo, it's like I crave it like year round.
I am knowledgeable about politics in the Philippines.
I still get some education about the political situation in the Philippines through like my parents and just like hearing what they have to say. It's mostly them and my grandparents who talk about it most at home. But still, despite them talking about it like through that, I'm nowhere near like educated enough.
Oh, like I lived in America, I should only care about like American politics. And then I started learning more about like our history and how we're all connected to the politics in the Philippines. And all those policies like affect us and our families, and like so that's when I started learning more. And I realized like really the only way to really understand and learn like more about the politics in the Philippines is through like community organizing.
Being in a Filipino community is essential to my identity.
I feel like you need some type of community. As a person growing up in a community where there was none, I felt like the token kid, you know, like everyone looked at me like, oh, she's the prime example of the Filipino. And I'm like, I don't even know what it likes to be Filipino because I don't have a community that shares like the same things.
Community isn't just restricted to like your geographical space. You know, there's like imagined communities, and like you can see yourself like being part of a community even though you don't see those people around you. You know, quote unquote whitewash, or you didn't have any Filipino culture or anything like that, and didn't have any Filipino friends. That's a result of like, that's part of the Filipino experience, and that's part of the Filipino community too.
I prefer the term Filipinx over Filipino.
I actually personally really want to be educated more on this manner because the whole subject of identifying as like Filipinx or for like other cultures like Latinx, right? I feel like I've seen a lot of discussion on like social media and whatnot for why people don't personally like to identify with it, but I'd like to hear more of both sides because me personally, I'm okay with identifying as either. I feel like obviously Filipinx is a little more modern in the sense that it, from my understanding at least, it tries to encompass just the concept that I believe like gender isn't just like binary like that. They want to encompass like everything that they want, but there's also the idea that Filipino in the first place didn't really mean to be binary in that way. At least that's what I hear a lot for at least the Latinx Latino discussion. So I'd love to be educated more for this matter.
Just want to kind of like make give some perspective into how the term came about to be, because the term Filipinx actually originated from like Filipinos in the Philippines, specifically the LGBTQ plus community, because when they call themselves Filipino, they don't really feel included because, the Filipino, culture is not really encompassing, or like not encompassing, but inclusive to like, LGBTQ people. So they felt the need to reclaim that identity for themselves.
By saying, like, I absolutely respect and will use the term Filipinx if people have a preference toward it. But personally, I just feel like, what is that doing for the community? Like, rather than having to create a whole new term and having, like, such discourse over it that I've heard so much about, I feel as though because most Filipino languages are not rooted in the binary in the first place, that rather than looking toward a term, we should look back toward pre-colonial times and really fixing the culture that like made people feel the need to create the term.
I wish I had learned to speak a Filipino language growing up.
So like I definitely agree with that. I communicating with my family back in the Philippines because like I don't speak Tagalog.
So whenever we have family gatherings or whenever I call, I just can't help but feel sort of like left out because I didn't learn the language growing up. And also because like they speak in Pangasinan, which is not as common as like Tagalog. I really wanted to be able to sort of like keep it alive somewhat by learning it myself.
For me, I grew up in a house with 4 native speakers, and you would think that I would have at least picked up understanding the language, but I don't even understand. And a lot of it stems from the fact that my family wanted me to assimilate into the American culture as soon as possible. So they all prioritized teaching me English first and only English because they were scared that if I learned Tagalog first, then I would be, develop an accent when I speak English, or just, they don't want me to be like different from the other American kids.
The way my family or relatives talk about the Philippines makes me want to learn more about the culture.
I'm on prefer not to say because really my family doesn't really talk about the Filipino culture. So I can't have any opinion because they never told me anything about it that would in general, that would make me want to learn more.
Whenever they talk about, I don't know, the type of things that they would do together on Christmas, for example, I'd love to experience that firsthand because it's of course it's really different from how the Western part of the world celebrates Christmas.
I think for me, I've always been inclined to learn more just because it's so second nature to them. But then I ask them, and this is why I'm only somewhat agree, is because it's so second nature to them. They're like, why do you care? Why do you want to learn? I thought you already knew this kind of thing.
Their opinion on whether or not I want to learn about it doesn't really affect me, but it's just, it interests me to say why they would say those things, as in I would ask, or I'd try to ask oh, was it, or why'd you immigrate, to the U.S. to work as, why did that, what happened in the Philippines? And they're like, and my aunt said it was life in the Philippines, it was fine for them. They had, a house, they still have land there, but they just wouldn't elaborate on why was it better here.
The Filipino culture is understanding of the LGBTQ community.
For me, overall, in understanding Filipino culture, I would say because of the conservatism and the Catholic colonization, it's very, not exclusive. But yeah.
I know some families who are super duper inclusive and understanding and willing to educate themselves more about the LGBTQ plus community, whereas there are others who are a little more ignorant. Maybe they they're indifferent, or they're outright, like John mentioned, not inclusive at all, and being just ostracize the idea.
It's oh, what can the Philippine culture gain more so like, oh, I'm giving them this platform to express themselves. Because when you watch shows like Vice Ganda, it's like really playing into a specific stereotype about the LGBT community. And even when looking at families that claim they are inclusive and are accepting to the LGBT community, you can still see the microaggressions of using terms like gay or bakla as derogatory terms. So that's what makes me think the Philippine community is like exclusive to that community, to whatever scale it is.
I feel comfortable speaking about mental health with my family.
When I opened up to my family, most specifically my mom, about it, she just passed it off as, oh, it's because of school, not because of other factors and stuff like that. And I just felt not heard, or that my mental health would be fixed if I just pray. And I tell my mom that's not how it works, and she just still doesn't understand that.
I mean, a part of it could be on how you were raised. So for me, like, because I grew up in an immigrant family, a lot of, whenever I talk about mental health, they're always like, oh, you have food, a house, shelter, water. Why are you depressed, or why are you sad? And I think that's a lot of that stems from, like, those are things that they struggled with growing up. So they see that, oh, because we have those things, like, why, what else is there to complain about? Cultures are collectivist. So a lot of what one person does in a family, it reflects on the rest of the family. So I think that whenever you talk about mental health with your family, they feel ashamed because, you know, they think that it reflects badly on them, or like the way they raised you. And like, you know, like sometimes, like, you know, Filipinos can be very chismosa. So like if someone like has depression, like all of a sudden everyone in the family is talking about it. And, you know, a lot of parents put the blame on themselves, and they think that it's a shameful thing. So it's hard to talk about mental health in a lot of different ways because of that.
Facing my family with these conversations, in spite of the discomfort, in spite of the weird aura that comes along with like this topic, because it's so foreign to them, because I really see the importance in like educating them more about mental health.
My immigrant parents' traumas come from like, oh, there's no food, like how are we going to get from here to here? But they also don't address the other traumas that come with that, and the other traumas that they grew up with. So once I made my mom reflect on mine, I think what happened was that she started reflecting on her own traumas and realized like, oh, there are more things than just school and work and food, that she's a lot more open to talking about things like that. Not saying
I have felt ashamed about looking too Filipino, such as with my skin color or nose shape.
And where I was the only person that had like really dark skin and stuff like that. So then they would be like, oh, why you so dark? Or like I would see the people around me, they're all fair skinned, and that made me like hate the fact that if I stand in the sun a little too long, I just get darker, I don't burn. And then that's where a lot of my insecurities about myself and like my identity as a Filipino grew.
I mean, growing up in like North Dakota, like kids would pick on me for being like the token Asian kid. So it wasn't so much me appearing Filipino, it's just the fact that I was different. Like I was shorter than like a lot of the kids, and that kind of sucked because like I was friends with like the basketball kids, and like I was darker skinned. I had like different features than a lot of the other kids at my school. So like I felt really ashamed not to be like them. But that's kind of why I said somewhat agree, because it wasn't so much about being Filipino, just being Asian in itself.
What does it even mean to look Filipino? I've been confused for like so many different races, like even white. I see, you know, a lot of brown and black and brown Filipinos, and I'm like, this is not what Piolo Pascual looks like, you know? So I think it's, like for me, I can't even imagine what it means to be like, I look Filipino after learning that, yeah.
I was taught in depth about my culture and/or history in classrooms.
for me, it wasn't until we went on that hi-fi trip to historic Filipino town that I knew that there was a historic Filipino town. And I would say that's like one just topic of Filipino American history, and just in terms of Filipino history in general, that has not been taught in my personal education, in my textbooks growing up as a kid.
It was mostly, I was told to assimilate into like American culture, and that, you know, I don't need to learn the Filipino languages because what's good's that gonna do in America? There was nothing taught about like Filipinos' impact in our city or like the city next to us, despite having a lot of population there for a long time. And they just now in Stockton Unified started to have classes to teach the students about different cultures in that represent our city.
I think I'm pretty lucky because at my high school, we were able to take Tagalog for a language, and I took it for 3 years. So I think that's why I can kind of relate to this question. We didn't just learn about the language, but we also learned about the culture in the Philippines. And I'm really like blessed and lucky that I was able to take that class because it kind of brought me one step closer to my culture when I kind of felt like I was unattached to it. And then also in my high school, we were able to take ethnic studies, or technically we had to take ethnic studies to to graduate. And for me, I took Asian American, so that was where I learned more about like, you know, Phil-Am experience in the United States.
We appreciate those who share their stories and opinions with us. We hope that this event opened your perspectives on the various topics that have been discussed within the Filipino experience. Salamat. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for the next quarter's episode.